Bueno, muy buenas, un gusto estar una vez más aquí en nuestros encuentros de Playdoc. Un saludo a Ángel, también a Sara, a toda la gente que trabaja en este festival. Y tenemos con nosotros a uno de los grandes maestros para mí del cine contemporáneo, un cineasta único, singular, que es Lav Diaz. Nuestra charla en español, lo digo primero, luego vamos a pasar en inglés, es percepción, estímulos y narración, el tiempo en la era de la aceleración, el cine de Lav Diaz. So, ahora paso en inglés. Thank you very much for being with us. Once again, in this kind of exchange and talk with people that we consider who are essential in nowadays cinema, contemporary cinema. For us, and for me particularly, is someone who I admire not only as a filmmaker, also as a human being, which is Mr. Lav Diaz. You are extremely welcome, Lav, and thank you for your time. And no, but thank you to you.
Thank you.
And you know that the title of this meeting is, I will translate in English, is Perception, Stimulus, and Narration. Time at the era of acceleration. And that's why we are talking to you, because of course, when we see a film of you, there are two obvious things that we discover. Most of the time, your film's length are between 3 to 4 to 7 to 9 hours. But also, when we think inside the film, short, sometimes 5 to 10 minutes. So there is a demand in our perception as a viewers. So I would like to begin talking about what is the need that you have, that your films are so length, in terms of length, so they're so long, and why you also work on the scope of the shot in itself, which are long. So what is behind that?
Well, simply, I don't want to rush things. Yeah, it's very zen. My approach to life, in a way, is like that. I don't rush things. I want things to be fulfilled in a way. The narrative, how I develop the narrative, how I develop the characters, how I create nuances. It has to come naturally, not rushed, not imposed on, not manipulated. I want my film to be that organic and free-flowing, like a free-verse poem. It has to be that way. Just like following the flow of the river or the stream. I don't want to block it. So wherever the thread goes, I follow. Because in my narrative making, I don't even know where to go. So every day I follow those threads, the feel, the feeling, the nuances, the verisimilitudes that you see, the little things that you see, you follow, or the big things as well, or some instance where you feel some inspiration from the sound or the smell, you follow that. It is a very casual thing in life that I do. That is my approach to cinema. And I don't think about limiting my work to, it has to be 2 hours. No. I just, let it flow. And then during the editing, there goes the length. It can be 5 hours, 7 hours, or even 5 minutes. It depends. So it has that kind of freedom in a way. No limitations, no borders kinds of filmmaking.
But that is a very daring decision in the sense that,
of course,
because on one hand, you know immediately that if your film is about to be 6, 7, 8 hours, not only some people maybe are not anymore prepared to watch or to be in a cinema like that, but also the possibilities that the film will be shown in a proper cinema or something. So how do you perceive that?
I'm very aware of those things, the market, the cinemas, the platforms of screening the films like festivals. Immediately there's some kind of a block or a resentment to my works. I can understand that. But then I want my cinema to be free. I don't want to be imposed on in a way. If you don't want to see a 3-hour film, then I don't see the need to show it to you. For me, it is
Mhm.
that kind of, it's a dialogue. Part of doing cinema for me is a free form kind of dialogue where we don't limit the talk to, the limit of cinema, 1 hour and a half, 2 hours. And I can understand that every time they have my work, like festivals, if it goes beyond 2 hours, then you're out. I've been to so many rejections like that. Then I'm okay
Like,
with, yeah, I'm okay with that. And I can understand. And of course, the cinemas, the theaters. If you go beyond 2 hours, they won't show your film. It will be very hard. And I know that, But I wanna be that kind of filmmaker. I'm subverting the convention in a way, just
mhm.
just to make them understand that this medium is very free. Art must be free. The artist must be free. Why must we be limited by these, institutions? We're the ones who are making cinema. It is that simple. My position is like that. My stand is like that.
Yeah, and apart from that, is in a way that the old motto from Mr. Tarkovsky, that the
Mm.
idea was a scalp in time. So
Yeah.
you're truly doing this in your proper terms,
Mm.
and I think it's also in a way maybe you can help us to understand also uh, something connected with the life in Philippines, the relationship between time and space, territory, history, the way of living. I have learned, I have been in Philippines now lately, at the beginning of this year, and I have learned that you have to be very patient in the Philippines
Yeah, yeah. There's
because,
in a place like the Philippines, patience is really an important virtue in life, uh, especially in the places where I grew up in the southern part of the country, where although it's the 20th century when I grew up, it's still very, very crude and very primitive in a way. The Malay way is um, founded on waiting. So there's a lot of waiting. There's a lot of sitting. There's a lot of There's no movement except for the sun, the storms, the rivers. Our lives, the Malay people, our lives are so attached to the ways of nature in a way. So my cinema is also part of that kind of culture where it comes from. It's influenced by that as well. That kind of perspective. If you talk about perception, how we gaze life, it is that way. The waiting is very important.
and how do you think it's the relationship between the something that nowadays is not being discussed, it's something that is not being lately. When sometimes you read nowadays film criticism, I see that nobody pays attention towards the idea of angle in the way that the framing is being thought. And I realize that most of your films, they have particular angles and the camera is fixed but in a particular angle, so in a way absorbs the possibility of being on the shot for a long time. And
Yes.
I have always that idea watching your films. I don't know, how do you perceive that?
Again, it's a subversion of the convention of
Okay.
how we do cinema, how we use this technology, the camera. Majority of the works that we see since the beginning of cinema is that camera is like used. Everything that's being seen was imposed on the camera, and there's a lot of those, the fast cuts, the cut to cuts, the conventional way of using cinema. For me, cinema is just an extension of how I see life, my gaze. So the way I look at space and time, it is that for me. So the camera becomes my eye, becomes my gaze, becomes my perception, becomes my mouthpiece in a way. How I look at life, how I talk about life, then it is that. Uh, there's a lot of moments where I want to do the convention. Oh, maybe I can do a cut to cut. Maybe I can do a tilt down here to follow the character, or pan there and pan here to follow the character as well, or make it faster. But no, I don't want to do that. Just to be, accepted in a way, the way they look at cinema. Why can't we just, relieve cinema of all these conventions? For me, it is that also. The idea of, again, going back to the idea of subverting what's, being practiced every day. We can still extend cinema to something else. Cinema is still very young. It's just 100 years. It's still very young. There are
Mhm.
still possibilities. We can aspire for more. We can extend cinema to other, realms. We can use it for philosophy, for poetry, all those things. Cinema must be that. It must be pushed somewhere, not limited to the market, to the conventions of the institutions, to what the critics are trying to impose on our perspectives. Sometimes, it is that. For me, I want to do it that way.
Lab, and do you think there is also a change of the perspective when you are
Mm,
working in such a way with the length, when you propose that the film is white and black and
yeah.
color? How do you think it works that in terms of the perception? Most of your films are in black and white, not always. But do you think there is something particularly different between that in the perception of the length of the shot and the length of the film?
You mean what's the effect of black and white in those kinds of setup?
No, I mean, maybe I don't know, because for us people that we have been born in the last century, we are from 56 or something. I don't remember the date, but in the 50s, and I'm from the 60s, and we are still used to be watching films in white and black.
Yeah,
But for some other people nowadays, white and black, it's something strange. And it's a
yeah.
second layer of difficulty, because
Mm.
everything is long, the length, and then even white and black. So what do you think you gained from the white and black?
It's immediately for me the use of black and white. Immediately it changes the whole setup, because we're so used to seeing life in color, the normal, the common, the ubiquitous. But if you do black and white, I can understand the perspective that it's an old way of doing cinema. They have that kind of idea, especially the young people. The contemporary perspective is it must be in color, it must be sleek, it must be, their idea of aesthetic of beauty is more into color. And if you do black and white, you're subverting everything again. You're changing the whole setup. For me, it's important that way as well. The idea that my cinema is already different in length, and the way I set up the camera, the way I do the shots, then black and white can also help in that kind of discourse in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, of course, I love black and white. I'm so used to it. So it's a very personal thing as well. I have
Mm-hmm.
I have a deep relationship with black and white. I grew up watching a lot of black and whites. The way I see cinema is black and white. That's very personal.
And
So
how do you? Yeah.
I'm trying to impose that as well in my cinema, because I love black
Mm-hmm.
and white. So this is what I want to see in my cinema: black and white, the long shot. So I don't want to adjust to one. If one likes color, I said, well, this is my cinema. Accept it. If you don't like black and white, then I'm sorry. Yeah, it's okay for me. Yeah.
I noticed, like, when the waves are gone, that there was something so particular in that film. For me, it's one of the most accomplished films that you have ever done. There are many, but this is one of the, for me, of your, let me put it in this way, that one of the biggest achievements that in your career, from my point of view, of course, and I think it's one of the greatest films lately been done. But one of the reasons that I also think there is some particular difference between these films and some others that even you have done is that it has been shot in 16 millimeters film. So again, do you think there is something particularly singular in the way that we perceive the length, the time, when it is still the old way of doing films, or in digital you can achieve the same kind of experience? How do you perceive that?
Well, these are two very different mediums, very unique in their attributes. With the 16 millimeter or the celluloid, especially 16 millimeter, you need to impose a lot of discipline. You need to measure time. I mean, the scene, you have to measure that. Everything is measured. Everything is, premeditated in a way. With digital, you erase all those things because you can do so many retakes and retakes, and it's okay. And the look is also different, and even the feel is different. This, even though it's part of of the evolution of cinema, these two mediums are totally different. They're different. The way I experience them, I have, as a filmmaker, I have a very, very deep relationship with the medium, with the cameras, with 16 millimeter particularly, because I started with 16 millimeter and Super 8. My early works are Super 8 and 16, and I really love that medium. But it's very, very tedious now to go back to that. There are no laboratories in the Philippines. You cannot buy the rolls here. You have to order in Japan or in the US, and then you send them to the labs, and and then again the editing, you transfer that to digital, maintaining the look. So that kind of mix up kind of colluded the whole thing, but at the same time it's very complex. You're seeing two things when you watch the final product. You know that it's shot in 16 millimeter, but the final cut was done in digital.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of complexity, that kind of duality in how, if you're the filmmaker, for me, I have mixed feelings as well. Because you're watching it. Yeah, yes, it was shot in cinema and in celluloid, but it's already digital. It is that kind of discourse as well. Because in fact, I asked the producers of When the Waves Are Gone that can we cut a 16 millimeter and we show it on 16. They said we cannot do that anymore. There are no more. You cannot show them anymore except for some special cinematics who still have the projectors. The projectors are gone as well. So you shoot in 16, but you do the final cut in digital. It's a mixed feeling. It's a mixed feeling. For me, it's not a fulfilled celluloid work in a way.
I know.
Yeah. Well, you can understand the feeling of filmmakers.
And Lav, my perception, like being talking with filmmakers, for instance, like someone like Albert Serra, that I think he's a kind of filmmaker that would have not been able to exist if he wouldn't have begun working in the digital era. Because his method is to record.
Last week,
But he's always he must have a film. It's 1,000 hours, and then he began, spring.
That's how we should.
My question is in this sense that how has changed your way of working? Because I have learned, I was in Philippines, as I told before, and I saw you working. So you sometimes you write the scene for one day after another. You have a kind of idea at the beginning. So you go, you shoot, you come back, you edit, you come back. So how has changed your way of working since
Well,
all these years with the digital era?
that kind of process, it's because of digital. With celluloid, I cannot do that because you have to measure everything, and the rolls are very expensive. So it will be a different process. You need with if I really shoot on 16, the discipline would be different. I need to write a script, a really reliable script that I can count on, so that I won't be spending a lot of money on just shooting and shooting and shooting. With digital, I don't care.
But
I can,
when you did the When the Waves Are Gone, for instance, how was your adaptation again towards, because it's a film that it looks like always like your films.
yeah, it was very dangerous because I was imposing the discipline of 16, but I was writing the script every day as well.
Oh,
And yes, and this was the the pandemic period. It was very dangerous when we were shooting it, but I took the plunge. Okay. At some point, we're losing all the roles, and so we're measuring things like how many feet do we have left, and then we count. Oh, we only have 2 minutes. So we tell the actors, can you talk faster so that can you move faster because it's only 2 minutes. So it has that kind of thing as well. The discipline. Yeah. It's again. I'm going back to that kind of feeling where I still want to go 16 if I have the time and money, but digital has given me this kind of freedom,
yeah.
and I'm very glad for that. I'm very grateful. I was able to do the so-called long works because of digital. With 16, I cannot do it. I cannot do a 9-hour film or 10-hour film.
Yeah, it's impossible.
That's why evolution of a Filipino family. I start I started on 16 for how many years, but then I lost everything. And then when digital came, I started shooting. I was able to finish the film on digital, borrowing cameras, digital cameras in the early 2000s. Yeah, we started shooting Evolution in 1993. I said, shoot, yeah, 16 millimeter, 16 millimeter. I'm doing 3 jobs just to be able to buy the rolls. A 3-minute roll is $85. It's very expensive here. Well, if you go digital, a 1 hour mini DV is 50 pesos. 1 hour, 50 pesos. And, 3 minutes, $85. It's impossible. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
impossible.
absolutely. No, I understand very well the problem, but it's interesting how the technology on one hand, the
Yeah,
medium on the other, and the need that you have as an artist, how you
yeah,
adjust and adapt. That's extreme. Is
yeah.
fascinating for me, and I think for everyone to listen to you.
Yeah,
I
that's
was
the
wondering how do you understand? That is a big mystery for me.
mm,
Uh, how you understand the length of the film, because to
mm,
be working in a film which is, I don't know, 1 hour,
mm,
90 minutes, 120 minutes, well, you could have the sense of rhythm, the breathing, but to feel the film in a length that it's around 6, 7, 8 hours, how do you how can you understand because the immensity of the time in itself, it requires an idea of the wholeness of the film that I wonder how have you learned to work on such length?
well, maybe just being free. Okay, it's as simple as that. I know, really, I can understand. the idea that you're
But
imposing.
how do you understand the rhythm around? It's not easy that.
No, it's not easy. Of course, it's there's it's really very hard because you think about, yeah, you're imposing, like I'm imposing 10 hours on Roger to sit and watch my film. That's already you're asking for a commitment, to experience your work in a way. So it's the idea of struggle for me is important in doing cinema. So I struggle as a filmmaker to commit to do a 10-hour film. Although it's not premeditated, it's not planned to be 10 hours. It's just it became that way. To impose on people to watch your film, that's another setup, that's another perspective, that's another thing. But for me, it is that. You, I also, I'm also asking the so-called audience, anybody who watches my film, to be part of the struggle.
Mm-hmm.
It's you can see it's some kind of an ideology in a way, to follow that kind of religion, can you actually enter a 10-hour work, you know? Because some people watch my films, but they go in and out, but to commit to watch and be immersed, to experience the whole setup, that's another, level of,
Mm-hmm.
talking about, cinema. Yeah.
And how is your relation with nowadays films? Because in a way, they're not almost people working the same
Mm.
rhythm and language and sense of time and sense of narrative. Like because you are a narrative filmmaker, you're
Yes.
not a contemplative filmmaker. So how you perceive, because there is a kind of acceleration of everything, like the length of the shots, the way that information is being delivered. How you perceive nowadays the cinema around you?
Well, it's weird because I'm really a lover of cinema. I'm a lover of cinema. I watch everything. When I enter an airplane, I watch and watch. I watch everything. I don't care if it's slapstick, it's comedy, it's even if it's Superman. I watch films the way I watch films when I was a kid. I have when I go to the cinema, I'm going back to that realm in my life. I'm a lover of cinema. I'm a kid. And, my father imposed that on us. We watch cinema every weekend, 8 movies. So all the genres we watch. So I still have that kind of relationship with cinema until now. I love watching cinema. Even the films in YouTube, the old films always, I go there, watch them. Some friends will send me some links of this and that films, and then I watch them. I hope you can send me films also. Some links, of films. It's important for me to watch everything. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. For me that nourishes my my being as a filmmaker.
But
I
at the
don't.
same time, you keep yourself in the same line that you have been working. But that is interesting for me because I realize that you are like that. You watch a lot of things, but at the same time, you do not change. You keep yourself in the way that you have been doing films. So I was wondering if you have to think about what kind of dialogue do you think you established between your films with nowadays cinema?
Well, you can see it as a unique cinema as well. I've created my own genre in a way. I've created my own cinema. For me, it's
Mm-hmm.
important that way as well. That it's cinema is about language. Foremost, it's about language. I have a Lav Diaz language, a kind of cinema language that I, you know, well,
Mm-hmm.
it, it's a kind of autism in a way that I cannot get away from doing my kind of thing, even though I watch everything. But when it comes to doing my cinema,
You go on.
I know where I'm going. This is my cinema. This is what I want to see. But I watch everything as well. But when I'm doing my own work, this is what I want to see. When I'm writing poetry, this is what I want to read. When I'm writing characters or following narratives, this is what I want to follow in the threads of the trajectory of the lives of these characters, or in the trajectory of the narrative, or in the trajectory of my aesthetic. I have a very, very particular, gaze in a way, even though I watch everything.
I agree completely, and that is the reason that why I call you to talk about it, because I know you're in that particular sense unique. I wonder if you have some time to think about that, maybe not so long in the future, according to there will always be people ready to watch your film, that's for sure, because there will always be diversity. But the tendency, it's like most of the people are, their brains are trained to be watching one shot after another in a quick time. So to be watching films like you is like just to be in another world in a way. I don't know how do you, I know that you must be conscious about that, but I was wondering how do you think about it?
You hit the right phrase. I wanted to be in another world. That this is not a world that's all the same. You have to. I think it's important for me as a filmmaker to be that I have another realm. I can invite people to be in this realm, to be in this world. You hit it when you say that it's another world. Of course, it's another world. For me, that's
Absolutely.
yeah. For me, that's the essence of cinema. When you enter a real great discourse in cinema, you're entering another realm. You're entering another level of perspective, transcendent in a way. It changes you. It changes the way you see life, the way you discourse on life. Even just experiencing that film, you know that something has changed in you. Even in the very very basic emotions that you have when that film hits you in a very very different way. When you get out of it, you know that it changed you. You cannot explain it sometimes, but you know that something happened. It's very transcendent.
Mm-hmm.
I want that
And
kind of my cinema as well. When they enter the film, at least they can change something in some molecules of their existence in a way.
Lav, if you have to made a kind of genealogy of your work in terms of the not in the influence, but what do you think are the main forces that has shaped this singularity that you are? Because of course, on one hand, each artist express something which is unique, but at the same time, there are many forces, many different signs and things which are behind us sometimes without knowing. But if you have to identify which are the so to speak, those who are behind you, your secret partners, your fellow brothers in terms of aesthetics, do you have any feeling about that, or you don't think about it?
Well, influences, I can only easily think about my father, my parents, how we
Mm-hmm.
were, how we were brought up in the mountains of Mindanao, in the southern part of the country, where they were public school teachers and social workers. And I grew up in a place where there's a lot of suffering, poverty, struggle. It started as a very idyllic, and at some point it became very brutal and bloody, and everything went to an abyss of, cruelty, especially during the Marcos period. That 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 upbringing really, really influenced how I work on my cinema. You can always see struggle, suffering, and at the same time, there's commitment and sacrifice. It is that kind of duality, that kind of, you know, you know, mixed kind of perspectives, which is very, very real in the way I experience life. Of course, at some point, I discovered cinema. I don't even call myself as, I don't, as a filmmaker. I'm not. Uh, I don't know what's a filmmaker anyway. Maybe I'm just a storyteller, or yeah. It's and also storytelling is very important in the cinema. There's a lot of influence because again, in the place where I grew up, people tell stories. We,
Mm-hmm.
s- we sit under the trees by the banks of the rivers with the indigenous peoples, and they talk about life. There's a lot of storytelling. I realize, even though the way they talk about, their experiences are very, very protracted, and there's a lot of distraction in the way they construct everything
Mm-hmm.
because of their fractured existence. But there's a lot of storytelling. The narratives are very clear to me how they dwell on their experiences, and they express it in their own ways. And that extends, of course, when I discovered the novels, the big novels, because my father has a small library. When I discovered the big novels, these are, again, it's all about narrative. It's all about stories. It's all about storytelling. It's all about dialogue in a way. If you read Anton Chekhov, it's all about that. The stories are so vivid. If you read Dostoevsky, it's very psychological. It's so deep. You can actually smell the suffering, the way he
Mm-hmm.
describes Tolstoy, the vastness of his mind, of his humanity. So I connect that to where I come from, and then when I discover these big things, oh, they're the same. It's just a different way of telling it. The Russians, have become so adept in this big.
Mm-hmm.
But you go back to the narratives of the indigenous peoples where I grew up. These are, fractured stories, but they're big as well in a way, because they're still talking about suffering, the psychology.
Mm-hmm.
They're still talking about the psychology of existence. It's the same. It's the same. It's an extension of everything. The way we deal as well with nature. There's always big storms in our country. In every year we have 20 to 26 big typhoons and big storms. We're the most, the most typhoon battered country in the world. That part of the world is there's always typhoon from the Pacific. So we deal with that every year. The big typhoons. These are big narratives as well.
Yeah,
There are
absolutely.
annual distractions, the annual reconstruction, the annual, death and rebirth, the annual regenerations. It's big narratives, struggles. These are the big influences in how I work on my cinema. That's why that way as well. There's a lot of spaces. Yeah.
Which is also a way of the understanding the an expectation, patience,
Hmm.
because you have to wait for the renewal. And something else that I think that I have not mentioned, but it's quite clear that in your film there is a third line of time, because on one hand, the length,
Yeah.
on second time, the length of the shots. But
Yes.
most of the time, your film tries to recapture certain period of time
Mm.
in terms of historical time. So that's another thing that seems to be, even though that some of your few later films are around our present moment.
Yes.
But you have always been going to the past in order to understand the present. So that is a third conception of time that in your films are always interwoven in what you are doing, which is something else.
Yeah.
And again, it's because you want to show the history of suffering of the common people, I think.
Well, history is, again, history gives you the biggest narratives of our lives, Like in particular with my works, I anchor all my works on different epochs in the history of our country, of my people. Like, it's always, there's always an anchoring of a certain year, of a certain, cataclysm in our country, martial law. The last one we shoot is World War II, and when the waves are gone, it's very contemporary. Just the last 6 years of the Duterte government, the murderous government, where they killed 30,000 because of the so-called drug war. So it is also very, very. It's a chronicle of the period always. I put that because if you put like 1997, the woman who left was 1997. That was a very dark period in our country. That year, the Philippines was called the kidnap capital of the world. There's a lot of kidnappings with of Chinese, rich Chinese businessmen. It's because of poverty. It's it's the result of too much poverty, neglect from the government, corruption. So you thread all these things. Why did the Philippines become the kidnap capital of the world in 1997? It's because of that. 1997. It's just the gap between the rich and the poor has become so wide. 75% of the country was reeling in poverty, in hunger, and 25% the status quo, the feudal, families, and the feudal, capitalists. They maintain the status quo that way. And of course, the result would be that, it's the revenge of the poor. So they started kidnapping the rich, the Chinese. It's scary then, 1997. And of course, you connect that to what's happening in the world. 1997, Hong Kong was, brought back to China. Mother Teresa died. All those, all those, you go back to 1997. What happened in 1997? It's a complex period, So that alone is a big story. The period, the epoch, so to speak. It's already a big story. It contextualizes the culture of the character, the culture of the narrative, the culture of the language of the cinema. So to anchor your film in a certain, in a particular period creates that, the gravitas. Yeah.
No, I don't want to go on so long because I think there is, in this case, the talk won't be like a Lav Diaz film. It won't take 7 hours. But sometimes I always use it when I'm teaching. I always say like a joke. I am a kind, because I can be. I just came from giving class today. I began at 5 o'clock and I left the place at 9 without a pause and a break. So
Wow.
the joke they used to do with me is, you are like a Lav Diaz teacher because of the length. It's very funny. And but just the last thing that I like to ask, it could be silly, but I don't think it is. You are a musician also. You're a very good musician, and I have learned during your shooting you always are with guitars around you, so you play for a while and so on. So how do you think your perception of the length of the shots, the perception of the lens in cinema, it's also shaped by your experience of music, which is something absolutely connected with time in a different way. So do you have you ever thought about?
Yeah, it's very connected. Cinema is, is music, cinema is poetry, cinema is the novel. In the case of my process, it's hard for me to create cinema without my guitars. So it's still, they're part of it. It's like an ensemble, I cannot write without playing guitar first. It's hard for me to do that. It's become like a process. I have to do my silly, shredding and everything before I can even write. It's the veins are so connected to how, the nerves, the cognitive, and the visual cortex of your mind. They're so connected, Even again, another part is just putting books beside you and then just read. A simple word can create the whole story. Sometimes if I don't feel anything, if I can't get the inspiration to write with the music, I just open some books and then after reading 2-3 pages, boom, it creates that. It creates that. It's a trigger. If you read a good word, if you read a good line, it's a trigger. Or even a smell when you're walking, you're trying to find something, and then you smell something. It reminds you of Maria. It reminds you of a good friend. It reminds you of a tragic part of your youth. It reminds you of some past that gives nostalgia or sadness in you. Then it is that kind of process. So music is very important for me in making cinema. Although I don't use soundtrack, but music. There's music really in my films.
Yeah, and I think it's so beautiful. The how you put it, and I am a witness. I have just let me say this. I had been in your place, in your house in Marikina, and which was a big discovery sometimes for me is to see what kind of reading filmmakers do, because I saw most of the things that you were saying. I have seen it in your workshops, and then you realize more when I was in Philippines. Also, I learned. And now I understand Mr. Diaz is someone who absorbed about so different sources. And then there is something unique in the films, but I learned more when I was there. So I was impressed and I felt blessed in a way to be able to understand, as I told you before, for me, you are one of the most unique filmmakers that nowadays we have. And with this, I am beginning telling the audience and you that that is the end of this conversation. And I wanted to thank you so much for your time, my friend, because you are giving us a lot. And thank you so much, Lav, for being with the people from Playback and Sarah Garcia and Angel and other people who are behind this festival, which is small, but it's big in its heart. So thank you so much. And thank you to all the audience. And this is it. And Lav Diaz has been with us. And we are very, very privileged to be together.
See you in September.
See you. Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.